Good morning, everyone. Good morning and welcome to our webinar. We know that all of you are just coming in, so we are going to wait just a minute to allow for everybody to log on. So we're going to get started in just 1 minute. Good morning, good morning. We're letting everybody get logged in. So we're going to start in maybe just another couple seconds here while everybody gets signed on. All right. Why don't we jump in? We've got a full hour to share with you. Good morning and welcome to the Colorado Health Institute's Hot Issues in Health webinar. Thank you for making some time to be with us this early Thursday morning. I am Sarah Schmidt. I'm the president and CEO of the Colorado Health Institute. Just a little bit of housekeeping. We have turned on captioning for speaker remarks, which you can activate at the bottom of your screen if you have not already. We will save time for questions at the end of the presentation. That said, if you have questions, please drop them into either the chat or you can use the Q&A that is at the bottom of your screen. And my colleague Joe will try to answer them, or we'll be sure to raise them when it is time for questions when we get to the end. First, as we always do, as we start our Hot Issues in Health webinars, we want to start with a question, get everybody warmed up this morning. So I'm going to ask you to drop your answer to this question in the chat. Today, we are going to be talking about belonging. What word comes to mind for you when you think about belonging? Would love if people would be willing to share that. Go ahead and drop that into the chat. What word comes to mind for you when you think about belonging? I see community, safety, wellness, friends, home, fulfillment, connections, comfort, respect. This is amazing. Thank you. Please continue to put words into the chat that come to mind for you when you think about belonging. We are really excited to be sharing this information with all of you and really hope that we can have a conversation today about this really important topic, just the first of many on this important topic. Thank you. Relationships, I saw it come up too. Valid. Thank you. If we can move to the next slide. I suspect most of you are familiar with CHI, but if you aren't, let me just briefly share. We are a nonprofit and mission-driven public health institute. We advanced equity and well-being in our communities through deep expertise, morning brain, and implementational know-how. We have been working with community groups and providers, state and local governments, foundations for more than 20 years, since 2002. And we've been providing trusted analysis, data facilitation, evaluation, complex modeling, and strategic communication. We are really grateful to partner with all of you on so many good projects and good work that is happening. And today we are excited to highlight Belonging Colorado, which is a new fund at the Denver Foundation, as well as the Belonging Barometer. I will let the leaders of that effort share more about all of this shortly. But before I do, I want to just share very briefly why belonging is a topic that is important to CHI and why we are so excited to be part of this work. Last year in 2023, we adopted a strategic plan for CHI on diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging that continued work that we had been doing on these issues formally since about 2018. And during our many years of working on these issues, really studying and practicing diversity, equity, and inclusion, we found that belonging is one of the main goals that we are reaching toward in those efforts. At CHI, we have been working hard to make sure that all of our team members and our partners feel like they belong. And I will say we are not always successful in those efforts, and we have a lot to continue to learn and to grow on and to grow into. But it's an important value to us and that we continue to strive for. Belonging is also a public health issue. Our very busy U.S. Surgeon General, Dr. Vivek Murthy, has named social connection as one of his priorities. And we are proud to be part of the Colorado Belonging Barometer because this project is so in line with the values that we live, but also the public health work that we are trying to uphold. So thank you for joining us this morning, and to all of the leaders in our communities who have made this work and its future potential a reality. And now I'm going to turn the floor over to my colleague, Karam Ahmad.
Good morning, everyone. It is such a pleasure and honor to share this work with you all today. Thank you, Sarah, for those opening remarks. I'm Karam Ahmad. I'm a director at Colorado Health Institute. I've been here for over 7 years now, and I was actually part of that team that helped put together a lot of our internal thinking on belonging and inclusion at CHI, and have had really a pleasure of being able to work with Kimberly Fu, Lindsay Whittington, and our national partners like Satya from Over Zero, who you'll hear from today, on making this Colorado Belonging Barometer work possible. A few weeks ago, I actually had the honor of getting to share this work at the launching of Belonging Colorado down in Morrison. And it got me to reflect on, why does belonging matter to me personally? And I think storytelling, I think sharing personal experiences, I think sharing how folks have felt or not felt belonging in their lives is very central to this work. It's very important to this work. So growing up, I grew up in family housing, actually, at Colorado State University, and it really shaped my understanding of belonging. As the son of Iraqi immigrants, I was in family housing. I was surrounded by really a diverse community of other children of immigrants. So our community was made up of, I remember all my friends were from all over the world, from Zimbabwe, from Russia, China, Iraq, Iran, Israel, all sorts of countries. And our community celebrated our cultures through events like what was called the annual World Fest. And we had potlucks, and we were able to share and understand one another. And despite actually being I identify as I'm an Arab American. Despite being an Arab in the late 90s and post sort of September 11th, I always actually did feel like I belonged, growing up in Fort Collins and growing up in that microcosm. However, then I turned 18 and I went to CU Boulder, and it was a culture shock. The campus was mostly homogenous. It was predominantly white. For the first time in my life, I really kind of struggled to find a sense of belonging. And my first few years in college were actually very mentally difficult, having gone from a community where I felt where I very much so belonged to not feeling that. But I eventually found my community by actually starting a social justice organization at CU, by joining groups that are centered around my interests, like soccer, by finding the places and the spaces where I felt that I belonged. And this journey taught me the importance of belonging and how it can profoundly impact my well-being and success. And finding those places and those spaces where I felt belonging made my well-being improve. It led to better success academically, and eventually helped me with my career and overall set me up for better success. So while I still, and everyone does still struggle with belonging some days, especially as kind of a third culture kid. I'm Arab, I'm Iraqi, and I'm also American, and I was born and raised here. I often live in kind of conflict between my cultures, but as my mom always says, she always says, take the best from both cultures and bring them together. And I think that's what we're here to talk about today. It's about how belonging and how bridging communities can bring that harmony. So I think it's really important to sort of share some stories before we walk into this work. This is an agenda for today's discussion. So we're just about to finish these opening remarks and welcome. We are going to, and then I'm going to pass it off to our friend Satya from Over Zero, who's going to share on why measuring belonging matters and sort of what the national sort of measurement of that work has looked like. And then we're going to bring that down to the Colorado level. My colleague Kimberly Fu, who led a lot of this work, is going to share some findings from the Colorado Belonging Barometer. We're very excited to share those with you all today. And then we're going to have some time to share a few words on sort of the launching of this grant-making effort, Belonging Colorado, from Dr. Janet Lopez from the Denver Foundation. And we'll hold some time for questions and answers at the end. You can go to the next slide. Just a very big thank you to our partners over at Over Zero. Rachel Brown, she wasn't able to make it today. She's on leave. Big thank you to her. Big thank you to Satya, who you'll hear from in just a moment, and from Laura Livingston from the Over Zero national team. And a big thank you to Belonging Colorado for launching this work. We're very excited to see it living and moving forward. And then this is the set of today's presenters. So I will be passing it off to Satya in just a moment. And my colleague Kimberly is a research and analysis manager at CHI. She'll introduce herself in just a moment as well. And then we'll have Dr. Janet Lopez at the end of the session share a bit about Belonging Colorado and how you can get involved. All right, so I'm going to pass it off to Satya from Over Zero, who's going to share why measuring belonging matters and why this work is so important. Off to you, Satya.
Thanks, Karan. Thank you so much for that introduction. Good morning, everyone. And thank you so much for joining us. I know it's early. I'm on the East Coast, so I know it's even earlier for you. Again, I'm Satya Murata, the Director of Knowledge and Learning at Over Zero. A little bit about Over Zero. Over Zero is a really small, nonprofit, nonpartisan organization that works with leaders in their communities to help them to prevent, resist, and rise above political and identity-based harm and violence. And through our work, we've witnessed the ways in which belonging, and as Karan said, like a lack of belonging, can really contribute to the conflict dynamics that we face. And belonging is related to several different outcomes and concepts. It's related to mental, physical, behavioral, socioeconomic outcomes, and many others. And it's a fundamental human need. Working together is how our species has really survived and how our communities remain vibrant and healthy when everyone is able to experience belonging. But without it, sometimes you look for it in those dark places, in those harmful places. And that's why it's come up a lot in our work and why we were interested in understanding how we're able to build belonging by conducting a national survey and developing our own measure that would help us to understand how can we address the deep fractures in our society and what can we offer the field that would enable them to readily measure belonging and be able to determine whether or not their interventions are working. So as I mentioned, we created the Belonging Barometer in partnership with our amazing partners and colleagues at the American Immigration Council. And we did this to garner attention to the importance of belonging as a factor for key stakeholders, leaders, and philanthropists who are working towards better health outcomes, a stronger democracy, and improved intergroup relations in the United States. The Belonging Barometer was our attempt to offer a measure of belonging that can be easily administered, it's very short, and that can be easily adapted to different audiences and context in service of these efforts to advance the common good. Belonging looks different for everyone, and the research suggests that it's very multifaceted, and there are a lot of different indicators that would tell us whether or not we fit or belong in a particular environment, or whether or not we might potentially fit in a particular environment. Those ultimately included in the Belonging Barometer scale are those that measure psychological safety, whether or not you feel able to be your authentic self, to express your opinions, whether or not you feel valued. It also addresses social connection, whether or not you feel connected to other people in this setting, whether you feel welcome and included, and whether or not those relationships are satisfying and fulfilling, and they just feel good to be in. And also it measured co-creation, that feeling of being treated equally, of being an insider, and of understanding how things work, and of feeling that you're able to influence the decisions and conditions that are happening. And we landed on these items through co-creation and collaboration of our own with a cross-disciplinary team of researchers from various disciplines, whether it be social psychology, sociology, political science, anthropology, and even medicine. And again, our goal with this was to keep it really short and really easily adapted to various life settings, which is exactly what the Colorado Health Institute team has done in applying this scale to the state level. So to measure a respondent's belonging, I'm just going to give you a very quick overview of what those scores might look like. The barometer is a set of 10 questions, and each respondent scores are averaged, and then they get a scale on they get a value from 1 to 5, indicating their average experience of belonging in various life settings, whether that might be among their family and friends, among their workplace colleagues, in their local communities, or in national settings. And these scores range from 1, an average of 1, which would indicate experiencing total exclusion, to 5, experiencing total belonging. But of course, we've got the full range of experiences in between. And so the scale is separated into 3 categories: belonging, ambiguity, or exclusion. And so if you're experiencing belonging in our nomenclature, it means that you have a score between 3.67 and 5 on this scale, and you're experiencing that psychological safety, that agency, and all of the richness and benefits that come with feeling like you belong. If you have a score that's somewhere between like a 2.34 and 3.66, that might indicate that you're experiencing belonging ambiguity. Maybe on the scale you just weren't really sure. Maybe you entered neither disagree or agree on a lot of the questions, or it may be that you really felt a strong sense of belonging and social connection, but maybe you really didn't feel that much co-creation. So you could imagine that happening for a junior colleague at a workplace where they just got there, they're making new friends, they're feeling embraced, and everything is great, but they don't feel like they have a lot of power in that setting. So maybe their belonging is a little bit lower because they don't really feel like they have a lot of co-creation. So that is what ambiguity might reflect. And then finally, we have the category of exclusion, which is a number from 1 to 2.33. And this suggests that the respondent might, on average, be experiencing ostracization, exclusion, or just all these negative outcomes associated with that lack of belonging. And so finally, we are so excited to have worked with the Colorado Health Institute to adapt the barometer to the state level. The original survey research was done on a nationally representative sample of Americans back in 2021, and it looked at belonging across life settings, whether it was family and friends, or the nation, or local communities, but it did not look at the state level. And it's so important to look at the state level because we know that every state and context and experience of belonging is wildly different. And so by being able to adapt this survey to the state level, we're better to get a more nuanced understanding of what belonging in individual states, and Colorado specifically, looks like, and be better able to identify the interventions that are going to be most effective, and to be able to track whether or not those interventions are working by redeploying the belonging barometer as needed. And with that, I'm going to pass to my colleague Kimberly to share more about what they found in Colorado.
Thanks so much, Satya, and good morning, everyone. Again, my name is Kimberly Fu, and I'm a research and analysis manager with the Colorado Health Institute. Been working alongside Satya and Karam and other colleagues at CHI like Joe Hannell and Lindsay Whittington to bring the Colorado Belonging Barometer findings to life, and I am excited to share those with you today. Before we do that, I do want to do a brief level set to give you an understanding of how we set up the Colorado survey. So we first started by creating guiding questions of what we wanted to explore and understand about belonging. So the very first question here was, what does belonging look like in Colorado? The second question was whether there are differences among the people who do or do not feel they belong. And finally, we wanted to go beyond the barometer to understand more about belonging and its different components. As Satya mentioned, there's a lot that it goes into belonging. It's a very multifaceted component, multifaceted concept. So we wanted to understand things like how people are connecting with others, as well as just the different spaces or activities where people might feel a sense of belonging here in Colorado. To answer these first 2 questions, we again partnered with Over0 to adapt the National Belonging Barometer and decided to assess belonging at 4 life settings. So whether or not people feel they belong here in the state, in their local communities, in their workplaces, and at their children's schools. And then we also included open response and targeted questions to really understand more about how people are connecting with others from different backgrounds, as well as, again, those places and activities that might evoke a sense of belonging for folks. What we found is that while a majority of Coloradans are experiencing belonging, there is room for improvement, especially among the large portion of people who are in that ambiguity category that Satya described. We also found that many factors, such as demographic characteristics or specific experiences, such as feeling loneliness or isolation, were associated with belonging. We'll dig into those factors more in a bit, but really it's important to understand how they might influence someone's belonging, and leaders can carefully reflect on how those can be used to improve belonging. Our survey also found that Coloradans reported belonging at libraries, parks, and places of worship. These and other easily accessible places in communities can be used to bridge social capital. That is, to build connections across communities and groups of people who come from different demographic or socioeconomic backgrounds. And finally, online forums, public transit, and schools and colleges are settings where fewer Coloradans reported experiencing belonging. These settings are opportunities to intentionally foster and cultivate belonging. So let's go ahead and dig into these findings. Again, across the board, most Coloradans are experiencing belonging, and we found specifically that about 68% report belonging in their workplace, followed by the state with 61.8% of people reporting belonging. Fewer people, though, about half, felt belonging in their local community and at their child's school. So overall, while Coloradans are feeling it belonging, we want to highlight again that there is a large portion, it's about 37.5% on average across the four settings, who are uncertain about whether or not they belong. So how does that compare to the national findings? Two life settings that were included in both the national and the Colorado survey were local communities and workplaces. The national survey found that only 26% of Americans reported belonging in their local communities and 36% in their workplace. It's important to call out, though, the different contexts in which these surveys were administered. So as Satya mentioned, the national survey was administered in December 2021. During that time, it was the COVID-19 pandemic, so things like policies around masks or vaccination might have played into people's sense of autonomy and therefore influenced their belonging. It was also a time of heightened social justice movements and political divide. Just how we administered the surveys were also different. So while the Colorado survey is showing greater or improved belonging, these factors could also contribute to the stark differences that we're seeing, which is definitely something to consider as well. So I'd love to get a quick pulse check of how folks in the virtual room feel. So if you're able, go ahead and pull out your phone or another web browser and go to www.menti.com. You can enter the code here you see on the screen, 4719963. You can also use the QR code there and scan it to access the Menti. Once you do that, you should go ahead and see a couple questions here, and we would love for you to answer: to what extent do you feel you truly belong in the state, your local community, your workplace, and if you have a child who attends a K-12 school, at your child's school? And if you have more than one child, go ahead and think about your oldest child's school. All right, we are seeing some results rolling in here. Overall, looks like folks are feeling they belong in the workplace and the state, very similar to what we saw in our national results. I'll let the results keep rolling in here and give folks a few more minutes to answer. But this is very interesting. I feel like this is essentially matching what we have seen in our Colorado findings as well, with the workplace and the state coming out on top, followed by local communities and children's schools. And I see a request here to go back to the QR code. I apologize, putting that on the screen, so you should be able to access that now. Awesome. Looks like we are slowing down a bit, and the results stand very similar to what we found in our Colorado survey. Highest belonging reported at the workplace, as well as the state, followed by local communities and children's school. That's very interesting. Hopefully something that we can continue digging into about what it is about these spaces that cause folks to feel like they belong or don't belong. However, maybe not surprising with the children's school there. All right, go ahead and keep that Menti tab open. We'll do another one later on in the presentation if we have time. You should still be able to also put in your responses if you'd like. But in the meantime, I do want to talk about whether there were differences among those who do or do not feel like they belong. So these are all the factors that we tested to see whether they were significantly associated with belonging. You can see that we categorized the factors into two groups. The first one being demographics, so things about who people are, such as their age, their income, or sexual orientation. And then we also had additional factors related to specific experiences, feelings, or beliefs. So, for example, how long someone has lived in the state, what their political ideology is, or how important they think it is to belong. These yellow highlights show the factors that were most frequently associated with belonging. A few things to call out here. So importance of belonging and loneliness and isolation were significantly associated across all 4 life settings. Education, income, and political ideologies were significantly associated with belonging across 3 of 4 life settings. You'll see some of these have an asterisk at the end, and that just indicates that the factor was not assessed across all 4 life settings. So for example, we only tested whether trust in other people was associated with belonging at the state and local community settings. But based on frequency alone, we can already see some really important trends, such as, again, that importance of loneliness and isolation and how connected it is to feeling belonging. What's also interesting about the factors, though, is how nuanced they can be. So, for example, age and gender were only found to be significantly associated with belonging in just 1 or 2 life settings. And we think that's really important to consider, too, and to really understand why those factors might be associated with some, but not others. So the next couple data points that we want to share with you are just a couple examples of how those factors might influence belonging. So specifically, we are going to look at age and gender identity. So when we look at belonging in local communities by age, you can see here that people who are baby boomers and in the silent generation reported the highest belonging at 56.1%, followed closely by millennials at 55.8%, and then generations X and Z reported similar rates of belonging at 47.5% and 46.3%. While there's no clear trend here of oldest to youngest feeling belonging or vice versa, again, it's important to consider why age might influence belonging. So to offer up a few things for you all to consider as possible reasons, well, first, people might feel they belong more or less in their community, depending on how engaged they are. What are the activities or events that are available to them that they're able to participate in, or where are the places that they're going? In general, just their perceived acceptance could also be at play in terms of influencing whether or not they feel they belong. And importantly, age might also be confounded by how long someone has lived in their local community. So taking this all together, that is something for community leaders to consider in terms of the programming or the activities and events that are offered and how they might appeal to different age groups or encourage different age groups to come together. The second example I'm going to walk through is gender identity and belonging at a child's school. You can see here that more female identifying parents and guardians reported belonging at 55.5% compared to just 38.8% of males. Again, some possible reasons for this might be due to societal norms or traditional gender roles and expectations. In that similar vein, we also found that men were more likely to experience belonging in their workplaces compared to women. Again, these are just examples of how schools and employers can reflect on their culture of belonging and how to foster it and extend it to those who might not feel they belong. So those are just 2 examples of how people feel belonging based on the barometer. But as mentioned, we also included several other survey items to go beyond the barometer. So I do want to shift gears slightly to be able to share some of those findings from our survey as well. But first, I am going to flip back to the Menti, and this time I would like for you all to answer, in your communities, where are places that you feel belonging? All right, seeing some answers coming in here. We see church, with friends, diverse spaces, at work. See a lot of mentions to the gym, local coffee shops, libraries. Definitely some very familiar answers similar to what we found in our survey. I'll let that keep going for a few seconds here to see what else pops up. Seeing cultural communities, neighborhood, dog park, book club. Gym, climbing gym, church, those seems to be the ones that are most frequently mentioned here. This is great. Thanks everyone for chiming in here. I love that there is a mix of both physical spaces like the gym, but also things that include other people like family, friends, neighborhoods. All right, we'll keep that going. Still standing strong there with book club, church, and gym seeming to be the most frequently ones mentioned, which is very in alignment again with what we saw in our Colorado survey. So let me go ahead and flip back to that, but please go ahead and feel free to keep popping in some answers there about where you feel belonging. Again, in our Colorado survey, we asked folks to, in their local communities, list up to 3 places where they felt a sense of belonging and to briefly describe why. One of the most frequently mentioned places were parks, including state and local parks. So you can see one of the reasons why folks mentioned that parks evoke a sense of belonging is just because they felt that there was a sense of community there. Folks noted that it was a gathering place for neighbors, a place to say hello and to see others engaging in similar activities. Folks also noted that parks are relaxing and peaceful, so they appreciate the quiet and the calm of being outdoors. Again, that's really important because it kind of alludes to that point that belonging, while oftentimes includes other people, can also be, folks can feel belonging to land and spaces and their environments. But finally, folks also mentioned parks because they are able to enjoy or engage in outdoor activities, such as going on hikes, bikes, or walks. Another frequently mentioned place were libraries, and I saw that in our little Menti poll as well. Again, the top reason being a sense of community and belonging. Folks noted that libraries often host events and they provide really useful resources back to the community. They also noted that they felt welcomed and included in these spaces, so a place where everyone is welcome and can go without feeling judged. And a lot of folks also mentioned the positive attributes of the specific location or facility they described. So for example, having a really large variety of books to choose from or really friendly and welcoming staff. And the third most frequently mentioned place that folks felt evoked a sense of belonging was a place of worship. And again, we saw that in our Menti results as well. And one of those top reasons really was because of that sense of community and belonging. So folks noted that places of worship are gathering places and they have a community of family and friends. In this instance, those who share the same beliefs as them. They also noted that these places are welcoming and inclusive and everyone can feel valued and accepted. Again, speaking to those components of belonging, of feeling like you are valued and accepted for your opinions. And again, also pointing to a sense of faith and being able to practice in worship and build that spiritual connection. So the last couple pieces of data I'm going to share today are on further exploring the spaces and activities. So here we listed different spaces and activities that we were curious about and asked folks to indicate whether they had visited or used any of those in the past 12 months. Of those they said they visited or used, we asked them to assess the extent to which they felt they truly belonged. So just one question, not the entire barometer. But here's the data that we found for spaces. So here you can see that most people strongly agreed that they felt they belonged when visiting a library or a local park or open space. Not surprising, we saw that in the open responses as well. However, we did see that less people felt they belonged when using public transportation or when visiting or using an online community or forum. And when we think about these spaces, a couple things come to mind, such as the polarizing nature of online spaces, which can be fueled by anonymity, misinformation, or extremism. And perhaps people feel less belonging in public transportation due to safety concerns. These are all things that should be explored further, but represent opportunities for community leaders and policymakers to address belonging in these spaces. Looking at the list of activities, we had a fairly high rates of belonging across all of these, a lot of them related to sports. So like watching sports on TV, watching live sports, outdoor recreation, but also things like volunteering, worshiping, and taking classes. The fewest people did report belonging while they were taking classes for a degree or certification. Again, maybe not surprising. We also kind of saw that when we asked about belonging at your child's school. Those notions Karam also reflected. I had very similar experiences as well. So again, schools and colleges might be one setting to further explore cultivating that sense of belonging. So with that, we shared quite a bit of data today, and that is just one small piece of everything that was included in our full report, which you can access on CHI's website. We're very proud to be able to bring the first statewide assessment of belonging to Colorado, but also want to acknowledge that there is a lot more that can be explored, and as alluded to throughout today's presentation, a lot of opportunities for action and to cultivate and build belonging. So with that, I want to go ahead and pass it to Janet Lopez at the Denver Foundation to talk more about one of those actions, which is Belonging Colorado.
Hi, good morning, everyone. It is, thanks so much to Karam and Kimberly for inviting me to tell you all a little bit about the launch of Belonging Colorado. And CHI has been a really important partner as we think about sort of what is our baseline that we're starting with in Colorado. So I'm going to just talk to you all for a few minutes today about what the new fund is at the Denver Foundation and what the initiative is. And then a little bit, I'm going to take the opportunity because we have our first grant making opportunity that's coming up, and the deadline will be at the end of July. So would love to share that opportunity and hope you all will push it out to your networks. So we have really been working and sort of incubating, and our friends at CHI have been partners as they've gathered this data on the Belonging Barometer on launching an effort to think about a big picture goal. And the big picture goal for us is really to think about how do we support work across the state. I always like to clarify, we are the Denver Foundation, but we're really lucky to have a really large suite of special funds that get to do statewide work, but to really work across the state and bring Coloradans together in ways that build resilience and sort of expand our collective understanding in our state about who belongs. And, I think that those of you on the call and those who are interested in this work really understand, and the barometer really helps us understand sort of that in many ways, in terms of having this local work, that Colorado is doing some good things and is a beacon for, I think, many who are seeking opportunity and connection. But we're obviously, like any other place, not immune to sort of the fraying of the nation's social fabric and really the growing divisions that I think we, when we listen to any of our podcasts or look at social media, or we turn on the radio or TV, we really see the divisions across ideology, across race, across sort of socioeconomics. And so we really believe, I think, as an organization strongly, that in order to solve the state's sort of most urgent challenges around a lot of those issues, it really is going to require long-term work to work across difference, that people who are from different backgrounds have to be able to start working together. And so that's really what this effort is about. So it is both, I would share that it is both a fund that is a special fund that's sitting at the foundation, but also really an initiative. And the initiative is sort of focused on, I would share, big picture, three big things. One is we really are thinking about this. We have this first grant making opportunity, but this is intended to be a very long-term effort to catalyze belonging across the state and advance and lift up the work that Coloradans in different communities are doing to make bridging and belonging a reality in their communities. This is also really about Belonging Colorado is really focusing on, I love both the idea of both skill the skill and the will, and really thinking about how do we build people's ability to actually do belonging work and help make connections and help do bridging, and then people's willingness and interest and want to be able to bridge across difference. I've tried to been emphasizing, because you all have just heard very specifics about the Belonging Barometer, that this effort is very focused on bridging social capital. And so the idea is really to think about social connections between people who are different versus sort of social bonding, which is connections about people that have similarities. And so we really think the belonging across difference is pretty foundational to sort of a thriving state. And so we are really focusing on that piece about bridging social capital and connecting across difference. We are going to have, I'm going to share with you all a grant making opportunity, but we really see sort of, I would say, the next year to have sort of 4 phases to the launch of the work. One is the local sort of grant making and the investing in communities that I'm going to talk about. One is, one thing we're really interested in is there innovation in this space? Are there entrepreneurs in this space that we could be thinking about helping support? And then the third piece that we're really thinking about in the third phase, and again, we haven't completely, we're really, building the plane as we learn and as we get feedback from community, is that piece around building leaders' capacity. And so we're thinking a lot about, in this first phase, are there opportunities? Are there tools? Are there curriculum? Are there support networks so we can really help build leaders themselves, their skills and their tools to be able to do this work in terms of civic leaders and community leaders and nonprofit leaders. And then the last thing I would say in terms of the first phase, and the Belonging Barometer is really core to that work, is we are really thinking about how do we evaluate our impact writ large of the efforts over time, and how do we think about less about evaluating individual grantees that will become part of our portfolio of grantees that are doing belonging work, but really using evaluation, I think, as a tool for learning and sharing out what we are learning from organizations really working to, and some that have done the work for a long time and some that are really just starting and have always thought about being able to do a project where they could build connections. So the very first phase of the work that I'll talk about a little bit is we are going to launch, we have launched our first grant making opportunity. And what we are really looking for is opportunities to be able to support bridging and connection projects. And so with that, we are really trying to think about a grant application that gives people the opportunity to, one, sort of talk about their idea that they might have to support their community, and through an LOI process. So we just launched, if you go to our Belonging Colorado website, and you will see that we have an LOI, which is a series of just 6 free write questions about projects or ideas or models or solutions that you'd like to pursue. And just to share with you all, and you can see this all on our website, but the questions are really about helping us understand what are, this is a very, we're looking for really statewide but local place-based ideas. What are community needs? How are people thinking about sort of how would you unite people or connect people through a shared priority, an interest, an activity in your community, a goal that your community is working on? And then there are other questions that really talk about who are your partners, how are you going to recruit, again, people who are from different backgrounds to be part of the opportunity. And then as a part of it, so the LOI is due at the end of July, and our goal is to really select 15 organizations that are doing a range of things. This is not focused. One of the questions we've gotten is like, is this about a particular divide? Is this a political divide? Is this urban rural? Is this immigrants versus non-immigrants? The answer is it is not about one specific one. So we are really open to what we could get back from community. But our goal is to select 15 organizations out of that LOI process. And those 15 organizations will receive two things. They'll receive a planning grant of $15,000 to really develop their idea. And then they will also receive an opportunity to be able to do an 8-week training with our partners at the Greater Good Science Center, who are really the gurus of building these skills with individuals. And so there will be an opportunity to sort of be part of the inaugural cohort that does an 8-week process that is both a training opportunity and multiple staff from an organization. Multiple folks can connect with that. And then at the end of that process, participants will sort of refine their original ideas that they put into their LOI. And they will, all 15 organizations will be invited to apply for a 2-year grant that is between, yes, I see a question, and I'll try to, I see Janess Brewer's question. Hi, Janess, good to see you. Yes, absolutely. So you need to be a nonprofit, but you can be a town, you can be you could be a city, you could be a sort of a government nonprofit, you could be a nonprofit, you could be a church. Essentially, we need a 501c3 status, or some people also are going to be working with a potential fiscal sponsor. So it's not just exclusively nonprofits. And I'll try to answer the other questions in the chat. Sorry, I just saw that one pop up. But at the conclusion of the grant, we really want to fund all 15 organizations. And the idea is that they will get 2-year grants between $50,000 to $250,000 based on their idea and their budget and the scale that they're working at for 2 years. So each year they would get, if they got a $150,000 grant, they would get a $150,000 grant in year 1 and year 2 to really execute on that idea. And really excited as well that partnership with Greater Good Science Center will also be available for technical assistance and helping think about, I think when community partners really work on starting to execute this, no doubt there will be learnings that come from it. And I think Greater Good is going to be a great partner for us to help think through that. So the last thing I'll say about this grant opportunity is sweet spots for us will be projects that bring, again, that different piece, like people from different groups together to address a community need. We are interested in new or existing programs, but if an existing program we are thinking about, is there expansion? Is there a new piece of the work? Is there a way to build on the work that's been done? So either new or existing programming will be considered. We will also, we really want to think about, how are diverse stakeholders in a community brought together? And we have an eye on really thinking about efforts to engage those who may be disconnected and are sort of sitting on the sidelines in terms of their own communities. And then the last thing I would say is we're really excited to launch this in Colorado, and also thinking about creative ideas for programming. We're really open to seeing what we get. So I will stop there, and I'm happy to, let me see if I can look at the chat. If not, maybe Kimberly could come off or Karam and help me. Let me see if there's any questions in the chat.
Yeah, so we've got a couple in the chat. We've got a couple that have come through the Q&A feature as well. And I'm happy to kind of just facilitate as those come in.
Yeah.
And maybe I can separate that. Some are about the barometer and about the data, and some of them are about belonging
Well, I will
Colorado.
Stop talking and
so
tell me if this
I'll
one's
direct,
for you, Janet.
the ones that are relevant. So a couple questions on relevant to you, Janet, I think. One is, how are grant applications, this is an anonymous attendee, but how are grant applications going to be evaluated? Who at the foundation may be completing these evaluations? What does that kind of process look like?
Yeah, that is actually, we're sort of building that as we go, but we are going to, with the LOI process, have an advisory that will include there's a group of folks and donors involved, and we will put together sort of a review committee. And I think maybe what this question might be, when we did the webinar a couple days ago, I'm like, a couple weeks ago, that's a couple days ago. People were saying, do you have a goal of like how many urban, rural, how many, it really is a statewide effort. We have not set goals around, we want, 2 projects from Denver and 3 projects from the Mountain West. We have not set goals around that. We also, another question sort of that got asked in reference to that, was, is there a political, are you, that divides piece, are you the most interested in any particular type of divide? And this really is, this is our first effort out to like our very first grant making opportunity. We anticipate there will be a lot more in the future and a lot more opportunities to be connected to the work. But some of this is really seeing what we get back from community.
Thanks, Janet. The next question, I'm gonna go back and forth. So we've got one about more so about the survey, and Kimberly, maybe you can speak to this a little bit. Renata Hill has a question of how did we find survey respondents and persuade them to participate?
Yeah, thanks for that question, Renata. We actually administered the survey through a panel survey approach, which is also what the national survey did as well. We specifically partnered with NORC's AmeriSpeak panel. So these folks were already people who were interested in taking surveys and were incentivized through NORC to complete it.
Right on. And then we've got a couple others. One of them is centered on, so one is, I'm going to pair these two. One is, are the survey results available by county? And I mean, I can just quickly answer, like, we can aggregate that data at the county level. So if you're interested, reach out to us. And then there's another question from Sarah Torres, and it says, in the local community belonging measures, did you take into account if their local community has a downtown? And Sarah, if you want to come off mute and share a little bit about that, just so we can get a little bit more clarification. But and if not, that's totally fine, but we invite you to share a little bit more if you'd like to. We can take a pass at trying to answer that.
Hi, yes, can you hear me?
We can,
Yeah,
yes.
so this question has to do more with if you're controlling for the built environment that can foster connection. So at downtown, or like, did you connect or control for certain characteristics that would naturally create a centralized place for belonging to kind of happen more naturally?
Yeah, thanks for that question,
Go ahead,
Sarah.
Kimberly.
In our report, our full report, I think it's actually included in there. We did a couple different crosstabs of how urbanicity or geography impacts folks' belonging. So there's a crosstab of like local community belonging, and I believe folks' subjective sense of their urbanicity. So whether they felt that they lived in a small town, in a rural area, in a big city. So there are definitely some different factors that we could look at that belonging to take into consideration whether or not, their community has a downtown or that level of urbanicity.
Thanks for your question. And then there was another question that it's an anonymous attendee. It says, would you envision the role of local school districts in addressing any discrepancies in belonging outcomes? So what's the role that, I guess, schools can play as a lever for creating belonging? That's a great question. I mean, I can take a pass. I think knowing that I think it's going to vary community to community, and knowing that we have the data to unpack sort of where folks do feel or do not feel a sense of belonging, or might feel that ambiguity, or not a sense of belonging in the school setting. I think there's probably a role for there's probably like big P policies that can be taken into place in terms of creating policies that ensure that students and families feel that they are included and belong, and that they belong. And I think there's also the soft P. There's the sort of more holistic approaches at the community level that need to be addressed. I think nationally and here in Colorado, a lot of people are feeling disconnection in general, and I think there's an importance of having sort of introspection personally and thinking about how people interact with the schools and those sorts of things. But I think our data can help unpack a little bit of that, but I'd invite Satya, Kimberly, like if you have any other reflections on sort of the role that schools could play. It says the role that local school districts can play in affecting belonging outcomes. Yeah, any sort of additional thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I would just say that schools are kind of an awesome place to do research ethically, because you've got a captive audience that's really motivated. Like everyone wants their kids to be successful. Everyone wants to feel like they belong in these settings. And so it can be a great place for like listening sessions to understand, well, why are parents feeling like they don't belong in this setting? Is it that they're reflecting what their kids are experiencing? Is there like an issue with bullying? Is there an issue with power dynamics between teachers and staff or something? Like getting at the understanding of what's happening, and then coming up with these kind of like pilot initiatives that you can try out at a school, see how it works, evaluate it, listen some more, and then try it again across the district. I think could be a really powerful way at trying to address this discrepancy, because like for all the folks who have kids, like this is going to be really important to them, and trying in that iterative, intentional way to make a difference is going to be really impactful, I would say.
Can I just say, Karam, like from a totally a plug of like this grant making opportunity, like I am really hoping that we see, I would love to see a school district apply for the opportunity. And obviously like thinking a lot about the new immigrant communities is like something that's top of mind for me, and thinking about how that integration works and what real true belonging looks like. And I'm also hoping that university partners will consider it, because I think that's another space. So I would just say like +1 to that comment, period.
Thanks, Janet. And then I know there's a comment in the chat that said, has the Belonging Barometer look at linkage in between trust in government, CBOs, others, and belonging? And this is from, looks like Janess in the chat. So I think that's an important, we've identified a few areas of further research that I think are going to be really important to unpack moving forward. And it's sort of one can be sort of those connections between institutions and trust. One can be sort of how do we measure and think about bridging connections between different communities. So I think these are areas that we're going to need to continue to explore. Again, this is the first time that we've done this barometer in Colorado, and that's a really great question. And then there's one final question before we close out, and it's just about who's funding the foundation's work. It's an anonymous donor. I can answer that, Janet. Yeah, it's an anonymous donor. Right on. Well, that takes us through all of our questions. If you have further questions, feel free to reach out to our team. If you can go to the next slide, our email information is up on there. And then I want to just give a quick plug for our next webinar, which we're calling the Chazapalooza. And this is going to be really our team is going to catch up on some of the latest research from the Colorado Health Access Survey, from telemedicine to oral health to reproductive health and substance use treatment. Our analysts are going to share findings on Coloradans' experiences across these different areas and more. So feel free to register using the QR code on the bottom left, and you can find the information on CHI's website. And again, a huge thank you to Dr. Janet Lopez, to Satia, to Kimberly, to the team at CHI, the team at Over Zero, and the folks at the Denver Foundation that are making this work possible and moving it forward. Appreciate you all, and we wish you a good morning. Be well.